In this video, I want to go over some of the things you need and what you need to do when you first bring home your cockatiel. The very first important thing, of course, is the cage size and spacing. You want to make sure you get a cage with appropriate bar spacing and make sure it's wide enough and deep enough for your bird to actually comfortably be able to exercise and bounce around in. I typically tend to prefer a cage with 1/2 inch to 5/8 bar spacing for these guys, and then one that's of course 22 inch by 22 inch deep and wide. I like wider cages because the wider the cages, the more room they have to actually bounce around back and forth. Now this cage is way over that, so that's a good thing. I don't like cages that are narrow like that, like 18 by 18 like some the ones preview sells, because then they're just, not wide enough for the bird to comfortably bounce around back and forth, and then they're not going to be able to exercise their wing. Now, even though I know it's a sleeping cage and stuff like that, I still typically tend to prefer wider cages because, they're still going to be in there for some hours and stuff like that, and you want them to be able to be active and stuff. Now, the other thing that's critical is bar spacing, because the last thing you want to come home to is your bird getting their head stuck in the bars or seriously injuring or even killing themselves. So you always want to make sure you get the correct bar spacing so they can't fit their little heads in between the bars. And I typically tend to prefer a cage that's under 5/8. Now this one's under 5/8, even though they claim it's 3/4. I always find preview cages always underrate their size of cage, and you can see that's actually less than 5/8 even. So king cage, and don't depend that of all manufacturers, because a king cage, for example, will actually go over. So they say 3/4 is probably a little bit bigger than 3/4. Always measure the bar spacing. Now the next thing too I prefer is a cage with vertical and horizontal bars, because then they can be able to climb around comfortably and stuff like that. And I like vertical bars as well, because then they can't damage their tail feathers as easy and so forth, because they're not going to get it stuck in between the bars and then they end up bending one too far, and then of course it breaks off. So that's another thing too. Now the reason why you see the cage empty, I did this on purpose. I do have plenty of toys for them, which I'll go over in a minute, but I kept it empty because I'm going to be taming them. Now these guys I just got yesterday, and part of the taming process is I don't want them to be scared of their environment. The more toys you put in there, the more afraid they actually get of their environment. They don't consider their safe spot. So I always leave the cage with the bare necessities that they need and stuff, so they can actually get used to the cage, and then they don't see all these big scary things hanging off the cage and stuff. Believe it or not, with a bird that's just being introduced to your home, it's actually a scary thing to see all these changes and stuff like that. So I always leave the cage as empty as possible. Now if you do get the birds with an actual cage, use the old cage. Keep them in their old environment. Even if the cage is too small, keep them in there for a little while so they can actually adapt until they get used to the environment, and then change them over to the new cage. It's very critical, because then it's easier to tame them. So I keep a cage, of course, as you can see, with 2 different food bowls, and I did this on purpose again, because I'm not sure what they're used to eating out of or drinking out of. So I put the normal style food bowls for cockatiels, and I put the regular style food bowls that actually come with this cage. And I did this on purpose so they can choose which one they want to, and they're at different heights and stuff like that. So they can go out ahead and grab them. I'll move that food bowl if I don't see them eating to the bottom and top, to kind of test to see what they're used to eating, so they can get used to eating and start eating again. Because when you first bring home a cockatiel, they might not eat right away. Now these guys did eat a little bit because they threw some food on the floor, so I know they were eating a little bit earlier, but they're not eating as much as they should. But don't be surprised if your cockatiel don't eat for the first few days or even a week, because they're stressed out. It's a new environment for them, so they're not really gonna be looking for food. They're gonna be more just wondering what's going on, pretty much, and stuff like that. Usually when it starts getting to a week and after that, that's when I probably would seek vet advice and take them to a vet to see what's going on and why they're not eating. But When I also do put their food, of course I make sure that it's actually, and I don't want to get too close to him because he's not tame, but I make sure it's a seed mix with different pellets and stuff like that too in it. So that way I can get them to start eating kind of coarse meat. Then I'll eventually move them to a pellet diet with fresh fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. But for now, I just want to get them to eat. So I'm going to try to get them to eat with whatever I can, even if I put millet in there and stuff, just to get them to eat something so he can start eating. And then therefore I'll go ahead and slowly change their diet over to appropriate diet and so forth. That's actually critical too. And the food that I actually use is this right here. And this is what I use when I bring home a new bird, so that way they can, you know, eat it, because they're usually like that stuff and they'll eat it right away. As far as toys go, here's the toys that I do get them and stuff. In perches, you want to make sure that they're real wood perch and that they, you know, look like a tree branch, or they are a tree branch. Same thing here. I get different sizes and stuff, so that way they don't end up getting bumble feet. They don't end up getting sores on their feet and everything else. You know, they won't have problems. You don't want to use, of course, these type of perches right here, because these type of perches are very bad for them. Always end up getting them appropriate, like tree branches or something like that. Make sure if you do take actual tree branch that you take the bark off and that you actually clean the actual branch properly before you put it in the cage, so you're not putting any bacteria and stuff like that and getting your bird inadvertently sick. Then I pick some of these wood toys. They like these. I pick toys that are actually pretty safe for them. These would actually be pretty safe for them. You want to make sure you get Cuttlebone mineral bar right there. These are critical for them and for their health too as well. And pretty much that's what you're going to get. And then also a rope perch or a rope bouncy thing that they can actually hang off of and stuff. So these are just basic things that you're going to need for your cockatiel when you bring them home. Now, like I said, don't put that in the cage right away. Give them a few days to adapt to the cage. Let them come out and explore. This is also the reason you don't want to put the toys in there too, because they're likely, when you open that door, they're going to want to come out of their cage and they'll be more willing to explore and stuff like that. So always just leave it as plain as possible. Don't put any mirrors in the cage either, because mirrors for some birds is a no-no pretty much. They end up more likely will bite you and everything else, and they'll be harder to tame. So keep the mirrors out of the cage. Just leave it as plain as possible. Put about 2-3 perches in there. I left the Dow perch in there anyway, but you don't have to leave that in there. But I don't know what they're used to, so I left both options so they can choose. Let them get adapted for 2 days. Then open the cage door. Let them come out on their own. Don't force them out. And then once you do that, then you can start the taming process and stuff. And in the next few videos, I'll show you actually how to tame a flighted, non-clipped bird. Because, you know, clipped bird's easier to tame, but a flighted one's going to be hard. And I figure I'll make for an interesting video to show you how to tame a flighted bird and how to keep flight distance and everything else. So that'll be coming up in the next video, and this concludes this video for now.